Now, what happens if Besson actually punishes China and signals to the world that the dollar system is now a weapon against everyone? The migration to CIPS accelerates dramatically overnight. Every time the US weaponizes the dollar, China benefits from the fallout. And we can see this pattern really clearly. It's repeating everywhere. Trump's first trade war pushed countries towards China. The Russian asset freeze accelerated CIPS adoption globally, and the war in Iran has essentially done the same thing as well. The results are unambiguous at every single time. Washington weaponizing the dollar makes Chinese alternative payment systems stronger by default. Besson is indirectly helping to build China's global payment systems with every single escalating threat. His sanctions campaign is going to be the ultimate tailwind for both China and gold. And if he actually pulls the trigger on the entire world at once, the consequences would be game-changing for the dollar system and not in a good.
大家好，这里是嘎人死绝频道。刚才这段精彩集锦信息量相当大，也把一个越来越清晰的趋势摆到了台面上。美国一次次把美元和金融体系当成施压工具，结果却在无形之中替中国的替代支付体系打开了更大的空间。制裁俄罗斯推动了各国重新评估美元资产，围堵伊朗又让更多国家开始思考贸易结算是否必须依赖美国的规则。如今 CIPS 每天处理的交易不断增加，人民币结算也正在进入更多真实的国际贸易场景。表面上看，这是华盛顿在扩大制裁范围，实际上却可能是在加速全球金融体系的分流。更危险的是，如果美国真的把制裁大棒挥向中国大型银行，面对的就不再是单一国家，而是全球资本、能源、供应链和支付网络的连锁震荡。中国会如何反击？美元体系会不会因此遭遇真正的反噬？接下来，我们就从债券市场、石油交易和 CIPS 的变化入手，看看这场金融博弈究竟是谁在逼谁走进死胡同。
Alright guys, so this is it. This is it. Now what happens when you cannot win a war using your military? You move towards economic punishment and you weaponize your entire financial system against your enemy. Now what happened this morning is truly unthinkable by any historical standard. The United States is officially upgrading economic fury to something called economic outcast. Now, this is the final gambit to bring Iran to its knees. The US has lost patience and they are now weaponizing everything available.
Today, we are launching Operation Economic Outcast to foreclose every other option available to the Iranian regime. Treasury has mapped every node, every facilitator, and every network that Iran has used to smuggle oil and evade sanctions.
And let's call this what it actually is. The US is not winning this war using the military. The bond market is collapsing. At the same time, the deficit is exploding out of control. Trump cannot continue this war for much longer, and he desperately really needs a fast resolution. Now, Besson himself knows the economy is in deep trouble. The treasury market is already sitting on the edge. And that is why he is considering using the Treasury General account. It holds nearly $1 trillion and he wants to fund the buybacks using it. And during his press conference, he made a significant admission. He has not bought a single bond yet through the buyback program. He knows exactly what that's going to signal to the markets. It would tell the world that the Treasury has completely lost control. It's going to trigger a immediate explosion upwards in bond yields. So he's holding back even as the pressure builds. Now, economic outcast is the final gamble this administration has left to play. Now, we're at a poker table and Trump basically showed hand. It's really alarming how far Besson is prepared to push the envelope to corner Iran. But he may have crossed a genuinely dangerous line when he extended the threats explicitly to China. Now, when asked directly whether Chinese banks could be targeted, Besson said every entity is now fair game. And that single statement changes everything about the risk calculation.
Secondary sanctions or penalties is Treasury prepared to levy against Chinese banks?
Every country, every entity should know that they should be prepared to face U.S. sanctions. And no one is above this. We are going to hold everyone accountable, and this is economic asphyxiation of this regime, no one should test our resolve.
Now, targeting Chinese banks is a very, very dangerous move. The blowback would not just crater the US financial system, it will break apart the entire American economy almost immediately. And here's the fundamental problem that makes this just so dangerous. China is a massive buyer of Iranian oil at least before the US blockade started. And if Scott Bessent excludes China from the sanctions, those will have no real bite at all. Iran with full Chinese financial backing could fight this war indefinitely. And American financial markets, they are running out of time to sustain the conflict. Now, will Bessent actually risk Chinese retaliation? Now, it appears he would actually risk it. He confirmed he could. Now, he stated during the press conference that no one is above the reach of US sanctions. So we must now prepare for severe consequences from China if Washington actually follows through.
That no one is above the reach of US sanctions. That if they facilitate transactions and are part of the ecosystem that turns Iranian oil into money, into repression, they will be targeted.
So he has painted himself into a corner on the world stage. Backing away from this threat would be deeply humiliating and create an entirely new set of problems. But going after Chinese banks will be catastrophic. It's going to be a very big error. Now, you're talking about some of the largest financial institutions on the entire planet. China is 4 of the world's 5 largest banks measured by total assets. ICBC alone holds over $7.6 trillion in assets. That is 70% more than JP Morgan. It's more than double the assets of Bank of America. And is the US really willing to cut themselves off from that scale of capital? Is Washington prepared for the total financial decoupling from China? If Bessent sanctions major Chinese banks, those institutions immediately cannot deal with US financial counterparts. Foreign investment from China is probably going to vanish overnight. It's going to collapse. Chinese capital stops entering US stocks and bonds completely. US companies with major operations in China is going to face an operational nightmare as well. So the self-inflicted damage will be enormous and largely irreversible in the short term. And Bessent really doesn't want to face that. Now, what is truly concerning beyond the immediate financial damage is how China will retaliate. Now, unlike Japan, China has no obligations to keep holding US Treasury bonds, especially if Washington decides to cut China away from the dollar system. Now, for many years now, China has been reducing their treasury holdings bit by bit, billions by billions, and they have brought them down from over $1 trillion to the lowest level since 2008. But Beijing still holds over $630 billion in US debt directly. And if you include Hong Kong, that figure rises to almost $900 billion. That is an enormous quantity of bonds that could suddenly hit the open market very suddenly. And can Bessent really risk triggering a Chinese bond dump right now? Absolutely not. China selling their treasury holdings would spike yields immediately, and it's going to take America's debt crisis to a whole new level, an even more severe level. Now, interest on the national debt is already tracking towards $1.4 trillion annualized. Imagine what will happen to that number if China dumps and triggers a cascade of selling from other major holders. Canada, the ECB, and BRICS central banks would likely follow very quickly. The selling would not stop with just China, it could evolve into a stampede. But what if China moves too slowly? That is the big question, isn't it? What if Bessent tries to freeze or seize Chinese assets first before Beijing can exit? Now that outcome will be even more disastrous for the entire global financial system. Every country watching would panic. They would just dump their own holdings simultaneously in total fear. And here's what makes China's position so strong right now. Their cross-border interbank payment system, or CIPS, just hit record transaction levels. Now, CIPS processed a crazy 1.2 trillion RMB in a single trading day recently. And that single day saw 42,000 separate transactions get processed through the Chinese payment rails. The world is already moving towards the Chinese currency settlements for trade. Countries and companies globally, they are already buying and selling goods with China using the RMB. Now, what happens if Bessent actually punishes China and signals to the world that the dollar system is now a weapon against everyone. The migration to CIPS accelerates dramatically overnight. Every time the US weaponizes the dollar, China benefits from the fallout, and we can see this pattern really clearly. It's repeating everywhere. Trump's first trade war pushed countries towards China. The Russian asset freeze accelerated CIPS adoption globally, and the war in Iran has essentially done the same thing as well. The results are unambiguous at every single time. Washington weaponizing the dollar makes Chinese alternative payment systems stronger by default. Besson is indirectly helping to build China's global payment systems with every single escalating threat. His sanctions campaign is going to be the ultimate tailwind for both China and gold. And if he actually pulls the trigger on the entire world at once, the consequences would be game-changing for the dollar system and not in a good way. There's simply no coming back from that kind of move easily. Now, we must emphasize clearly that targeting Chinese banks will likely be the ultimate red line for Beijing. China would strike back hard, and they will strike back fast against multiple fronts. We have not even addressed the supply chain risk or the rare earth export ban card China can just throw down, and both of those weapons will be deployed immediately in retaliation. And it appears that the US has already made up their mind to escalate further regardless of the risk. Besson just issued another unthinkable warning just recently, suggesting a massive punishment package could arrive as soon as this week.
And I would expect that you will see a major announcement of a financial institution being sanctioned by the end of this week.
So guys, we have to brace for impact for this one. The consequences of what's going to come is going to be felt across every single economy globally. But as always, let me know what you think. Will the US really follow through and sanction countries around the world over Iran? And will Besson actually target Chinese banks and attempt to cut them off from the dollar system despite everything?
从这段内容来看，眼前的冲突已经不再只是伊朗与美国之间的军事对抗，也不只是一次普通的制裁升级，它正在逐渐演变成一场围绕能源、金融、支付系统和全球秩序展开的全面较量。军事手段如果无法迅速结束战争，经济制裁就会被推到台前。而当制裁不再针对少数个人和企业，而是开始追踪石油、黄金、科技、航运、航空以及数字资产等多个领域时，它所影响的就不再只是一个国家的政府，而是整个跨境贸易体系。美国试图通过刺激制裁，把所有可能帮助伊朗的国家、银行、企业和中间机构都纳入压力范围，只要继续与伊朗进行石油交易，帮助他结算资金或者协助他规避限制，就可能面临资产冻结、交易中断，甚至被排除在美元金融网络之外。这样的做法确实能够在短期内制造巨大的震慑力，因为今天的国际贸易仍然有相当一部分依赖美元清算、美国银行体系和环球银行间金融通信网络。一旦这些通道被切断，相关国家的企业就可能立刻面临资金无法到账、合同无法履行、保险无法续接以及供应链被迫停摆的问题。但问题也正在这里，制裁越强，反作用力可能越大。一个国家当然可以利用自身的金融优势惩罚对手，可是当这种优势被频繁用作外交和地缘政治武器时，世界各国就会开始重新思考一个问题：把全部交易、储备和结算都放在同一套体系里，究竟是效率更高，还是风险更集中？这也是为什么伊朗问题会牵动中国。俄罗斯、欧洲、日本以及许多能源进口国，对这些国家来说，表面上看，他们面对的是一项具体的制裁命令，但更深层的现实是，他们必须在国家利益、金融安全和与美国的关系之间做出选择。他们既不愿意轻易放弃美元体系，也不可能完全忽视替代支付渠道的发展。因为一旦某个国家的资产可以在政治决定下被冻结，某家银行可以在没有传统金融危机的情况下被排除，其他国家就会意识到金融网络本身已经成为战略竞争的一部分。中国在这场博弈中的特殊性更让局势变得复杂。中国不仅是重要的能源买家，也是全球最大的贸易和制造业中心之一，拥有庞大的银行体系、广泛的跨境贸易网络以及正在不断扩大的人民币结算能力。中国的跨境支付系统虽然还无法在所有领域取代美元，但它已经提供了另一种可能：国家之间的贸易可以逐渐减少对单一货币和单一金融通道的依赖。 因此，如果美国真的把中国大型银行列入制裁名单，结果可能远远超出打击伊朗的初衷。美国企业在中国的业务会受到冲击，中国企业也可能减少对美国市场和美国资产的依赖。更严重的是，全球投资者可能开始重新评估美国国债、美元资产以及美国金融机构的政治风险。到那时，制裁就不再是一把直指向对手的武器，而可能变成一把同时割伤使用者和被制裁者的双刃剑。当然，这并不意味着中国可以毫无代价地抛售手中的美国资产，也不意味着替代支付系统能够在一夜之间完成重建。大规模抛售本身会压低资产价格，冲击市场信心，也可能让持有相关资产的国家承受损失。真正危险的地方在于，一旦市场参与者因为恐惧而同时行动，金融市场就可能从理性调整迅速滑向连锁性抛售。那时候，问题就不再是谁先出手，而是谁能够承受最初几轮冲击。能源市场同样如此，战略石油储备下降，实体原油供应紧张，运输风险上升，都会让价格波动更加剧烈。如果战争持续时间过长，制裁又进一步限制能源流通，那么价格上涨就可能从局部事件演变成全球性的通胀压力，降息未必能够解决问题，因为利率下降可能刺激需求，却无法凭空增加石油供应。而如果为了压制通胀，继续维持高利率，有可能加剧债务压力，拖累经济增长，能源利率、债券和汇率彼此牵连，最终形成一个任何政策都难以轻松破解的困局。这段内容最值得我们警惕的，不是某一项制裁本身，而是误判和升级可能带来的后果。当各方都认为自己只是在施加有限压力，对手却把它理解为生存威胁时，冲突就很容易越过原本设定的边界。尤其是针对大型银行、关键支付系统和战略资源的行动，一旦真正落地，就很难恢复到原来的状态。信任一旦消失，企业会改变供应链，国家会调整储备结构，金融机构会重新安排结算渠道，而这些变化往往比一纸政策持续得更久。所以，我们不能只看谁在发布制裁，谁在发出警告，也不能只看短期市场出现了什么涨跌。更重要的是，要观察全球各国是否开始减少对单一金融体系的依赖，能源贸易是否出现新的结算方式，银行和企业是否在重新布局资产与供应链，以及美国是否仍然拥有把美元体系作为全球公共基础设施来维护的意愿。如果美元体系只被视为一种惩罚工具，它的权威可能会在一次次制裁中被消耗。如果各方能够意识到相互依赖的代价，愿意为谈判保留空间，局势才有可能避免滑向全面金融对抗。对于普通人来说，这场冲突最终也会通过油价、物价、汇率、就业、投资和日常消费传导到身边。国际政治从来不是遥远的新闻，它往往会以更高的生活成本和更大的不确定性进入每一个家庭。接下来真正需要关注的是制裁是否会继续扩大，美国是否会把压力延伸到中国金融机构，以及中国和其他国家将如何回应。你认为这场行动是在迫使伊朗让步，还是在加速全球金融体系的分裂？如果中国银行受到制裁，中国会选择强硬反击，还是继续保留谈判空间？欢迎在评论区留下你的判断，也欢迎点赞订阅，看更多精彩视频。